As election day approaches, one of the major factors people focus on is inflation. Let's talk about that from a few different angles. What caused inflation? There is a narrative that stimulus spending caused it, but that is what's called a reduction fallacy. Most things have more than one cause. Several things caused inflation. For example, the price of eggs went up because half the egg-laying hens died of avian flu. The price of rice went up because India, which used to export 40% of the world's rice supply, started limiting how much rice it exports. The price of gas went up for multiple reasons, including a reduction in supply due to the end of the pandemic, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and OPEC inflating prices. The price of beef went up because of droughts that caused a grain shortage, which, in turn, made beef more expensive to raise. Global supply chain issues may have contributed to as much as 60% of inflation. For instance, a chip shortage raised the price of new cars, which affected the price of used cars. Price gouging also had an impact once inflation started going. The important thing to recognize is that none of those things are related to stimulus spending. While stimulus spending had some impact on it, when you try to parse out its effect alone, it is, at most, 40% of it. How is inflation measured? It's important to understand how percentages work because many times they can be used to misconstrue how much inflation has actually happened. Here's a hypothetical illustration. To simplify the math, let's say this beach ball cost $1 before COVID. It falls to 50 cents during COVID because no one was going to the beach. It goes back to $1 after we return to normal. Effectively, outside of the pandemic, there was no price change, but it fell by 50% under Trump and rose by 100% under Biden. To say Trump cut the cost of beach balls or that Biden caused the price to go up would be silly. Many of the price changes cited by Republicans in memes, such as fuel, hotels, and airline travel, misleadingly use this phenomenon to actually reward Trump for COVID and punish Biden for his recovery. Was inflation avoidable? There's a fallacy known as post hoc ergo propter hoc. It means after this, therefore because of this. In other words, if event A happened before event B, event A caused event B. For example, say I pause to tie my shoe and then get hit by a car crossing the street. I did not get hit by a car because I tied my shoe. I got hit by the car because I didn't look both ways. In other words, inflation happening while Biden was president doesn't mean that inflation happened because Biden was president. The supply chain issues that caused as much as 60% of the inflation were already set in motion before Biden ever took office. Another 17% was just baked in regardless of anything that happened. Yet, Biden is blamed for all of it. Furthermore, the part of inflation that was caused by the stimulus spending wouldn't have caused inflation without it actually stimulating the economy. Was economic recovery inevitable? In 2020, the CBO produced a report projecting we would have 5.9% inflation by the end of 2024. Instead, we've been hovering near 4% for the last 3 years, well ahead of schedule. In February 2023, it hit 3.4%, the lowest rate in 54 years before the Fed raised interest rates to curb inflation. Biden also has the lowest underemployment, which measures how many people have to take second jobs because their first doesn't pay enough. Relatedly, wages have increased 26% since Biden took office, while inflation has increased just 20%. This means that the average American has more buying power than before the pandemic, even after adjusting for inflation. Now inflation is down to 2.4% as Biden has made the soft landing like Simone Biles in the Olympics, avoiding a recession by bringing down inflation without high unemployment. Because of that, Biden has lowered the wealth gap, the difference between the highest and lowest income earners, more than any president since Eisenhower. Furthermore, the GDP is up from $20.93 trillion to $28.78 trillion, an increase of 37.5%, well ahead of even pre-pandemic projections. Finally, the stock market is routinely setting record highs. We know this wasn't inevitable because the U.S. economy is stronger relative to the other first world nations than it has been since World War II. So while stimulus spending may have caused some of the inflation, its benefits were greater than the cost. You can't factor in the costs of stimulus spending without considering the benefits, and it's clear that the latter outweighs the former. In sum, Biden's economic policies have helped the nation not only recover from the pandemic, but exceed even the most optimistic expectations.